Hello, and welcome to Here by Nature. Today we're going over the book of Numbers, very vaguely, as well as the key verse, which is 1434. But before we get to that, I'm going to read the introduction from the English Standard Version Journaling Study Bible, if I can flip to it. The author and date. Moses is the source and primary author of the Book of Numbers, which is the fourth volume in the Pentateuch. Its English name comes from the census in chapters 1 through 4 and 26. Numbers tells of Israel's journey from Mount Sinai to the borders of the Promised Land, summarizing some 40 years of the nation's history, with Israel having been freed from slavery in Egypt and then receiving the law, Exodus and Leviticus. The book of Numbers begins with the people's final preparations to leave Sinai. It then records their triumphal setting out before a series of events in which the people grumbled about their difficulty of the journey and the impossibility of conquering Canaan. This response leads God to delay their entry to Canaan by 40 years. The closing chapters of the book tell how the people at last set out again and reached the banks of the Jordan, ready to cross into the land promised to their forefathers. The theme and purpose. The theme of Numbers is the gradual fulfillment of the promises to Abraham that his descendants would be the people of God and would occupy the land of Canaan. The book shows the reality of God's presence with Israel in the pillar of cloud and fire over the tabernacle. It also shows how Israel's unbelief delays the entry to Canaan and costs many lives. Nevertheless, in the end of the book, Israel is ready to enter the land. There are 4 overall key themes. There were 4 elements to God's promise to Abraham in Genesis 12, 1 through 3, and they play a role in Numbers. Number 1, the land. Numbers describes Israel's journey towards the Promised Land. Number 2, descendants. Abraham had been promised that his descendants would be as many as the stars of heaven. Genesis 15:5. Jacob's family consisted of just 70 persons when he entered Egypt. Genesis 46:27. Now, they had increased immensely. The first census, Numbers 1 through 46, shows that the fighting men numbered 603,550. That did not include women and children. Surveying their camp from a hilltop, Balaam declared, "Who can count the dust of Jacob or number the fourth part of Israel?" 23:11. 23:10. Balaam went on to predict that Israel would become a powerful kingdom in its own right. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. 24:17. Number 3, covenant relationship with God. The essence of the covenant was, "You shall be my people, and I will be your God." The Lord's presence with Israel is constantly highlighted throughout the book of Numbers. Number 4 being blessing to the nations. This is the aspect of the promises to Abraham that is least apparent in Numbers. To a greater or lesser degree, the nations that Israel encountered are all hostile. Nevertheless, Balaam recalls the phrasing of Genesis 12:3 when he says, "Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you." Numbers 24:9. Nations who treat Israel generously by blessing her will themselves be blessed. And the key verse is 14:34, which reads, "According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a year for each day. You shall bear your iniquity 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. The first key takeaway is unbelief has real consequences. Numbers repeatedly shows that Israel's failure to trust God, despite his proven faithfulness, led to prolonged wandering and missed promise. God's promises remain true, but unbelief can delay or distort our experience of them. The journal prompts for the first key takeaway are: where in my life am I hesitating to trust God fully, even though I've seen his faithfulness before? What wilderness seasons might be the result of fear or disobedience rather than God's absence? How can I actively choose faith over fear in a current situation? The second key takeaway is God's discipline is just and purposeful. The 40 years of wandering were not random. They directly corresponded to Israel's 40 days of unbelief. God's discipline is measured, intentional, and rooted in justice. God's correction is not arbitrary. It is purposeful, shaping his people and revealing his holiness. The journal prompts for the second key takeaway are: how do I typically respond to correction or consequences in my life? With resistance or reflection? What might God be trying to teach me or refine in me through a difficult season? Do I trust that God's discipline comes from his love and desire for my growth? The third key takeaway is God remains faithful despite human failure. Even in judgment, God did not abandon his people. He preserved a remnant, guided them daily, and ultimately fulfilled his covenant promises. Human failure does not cancel God's faithfulness. His plans endure beyond our shortcomings. And the journal prompts for the third key takeaway are: where have I seen God remain faithful to me, even when I was unfaithful or inconsistent? How does remembering God's past faithfulness strengthen my trust in him today? In what ways can I walk more faithfully, knowing God's promises are still secure? So I'm going to start the personal reflection part with takeaway one's third question, which is: how can I actively choose faith over fear in a current situation? So, those that follow my channel weekly, first of all, thank you. And second of all, you might notice a difference. I have a full face of makeup on, and minus my eyebrows, but that's fine. But I have an interview the day that I'm recording this for a position swap. So instead of being at the Beaumont location, I'll be in my hometown's location, which is going to be less volume, less stress. I say that only because that's the way that it was pitched to me. I will be, however, instead of a photo specialist, and I don't know which video I explained that, but I got blessed by a higher stress job at the Beaumont location to become a photo specialist instead, which was phenomenal. I went to school for photography, so that was like amazing. But instead of being a photo specialist in Beaumont, I will be a shift lead. They call them SFLs, sales floor leader, but basically a manager on duty. and this will be my first time with a proper manager role instead of just like a you're in charge of this little area of the store kind of thing, like a store within a store. But yeah, the timing of it is just way too perfect. So I forget the exact days, but one day I completely burned out while I was at work, had a minor mental breakdown, and I had to leave work early just because I was in tears and it was like ugly crying, like snot, and it was disgusting. But I had to leave work. And then the next day, my store manager, she comes up to me and she's like, hey, uh, I know that you live in this town. It's a lot less stress, lower volume. Would you be interested in like going over there? And I was like, yeah, sure. So she told me to apply for the position. And here I am today about to interview for it. And part of me is a little worried because I may be asking too much, but I'm going to be asking that I can have Sundays off to celebrate the Sabbath, and Thursday evenings, like I can work until 5 p.m. Just because I have my small group in the morning or in the afternoons. I can work the mornings. But yeah, that's just that part of my life has become so ingrained in who I am now that I really hope that those two asks aren't too big. So trying not to be fearful and trying to have faith that, again, he will provide, as he already provided my way out of a high stress, high volume location. And now all I have to do is walk in obedience, per se. So, yeah. So, going back to kind of what I said in the first key takeaway, I've never really held a managerial position. However, I have had a lot of different managers. So, initially, whenever I first got hired on at Walgreens, I was like, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it kind of worked out that way. I started as when they had them, I started as a photo tech, and they just recently brought them back as a little side note. But like a decade ago, I was a photo tech, and then I was a photo tech, and then I moved up pretty quickly to be the head photo specialist, which was leader of that team. But it was like we were all friends, so like it didn't really feel like a manager position to me, even though it could kind of be classified as that. And then after that, they dissolved the photo department, and they were like, hey, we need to find you a new position, go to pharmacy, or you can go to pharmacy. So I got my red card, and all of that happened. Failed the test by one question. Will always be a little salty about that. But that one question, and I remember the decision that I made in the test. That really did basically like change my life. So instead of staying at Walgreens for who knows how long, I ended up getting a job at Best Buy and went through a couple different store managers there, went through a couple store managers at a different place that I worked, and then ended up back at Walgreens. And each person taught me a bunch of different things about different manager styles and pros and cons of them, as well as the type of manager that I would like to be. So, in a roundabout way, I feel like I'm kind of prepared for being somebody else's manager and taking on the responsibility of being the manager on duty. So, I don't know. Before this turns into interview prep, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Hopefully, you heard whatever it is you needed to hear today. And until next week, friends, I'll see you then, and have a blessed one.